the remote planet of Nintar, where dense, lush forests abruptly give way to vast, harsh deserts, had become an unlikely battlefield. On this day, the arid sands were witness to a fierce confrontation between human forces and the Martorian Empire. Amid the chaos, Adara, a high-ranking Martorian warrior, found herself abandoned by her comrades after a crippling defeat. As the dust settled and the distant sounds of retreat echoed across the barren landscape, Adara lay wounded, her once pristine armor now marred with scars and sand. Her breaths were shallow, each inhale a sharp reminder of her isolation and the betrayal she felt. The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows and offering little comfort from the cold that began to creep over the desert. Struggling with her injuries, Adara managed to pull herself to a nearby rock for support. She reached into her gear, pulling out an old, battered communicator. With trembling fingers, she activated the device, sending out a distress signal into the void, unsure if salvation would come from friend or foe. Meanwhile, Captain Ethan Parker of the human fleet, aboard the starship Resolute, intercepted the faint signal. Ethan, a seasoned leader known for his tactical acumen and compassion, was intrigued by the transmission originating from such a hostile environment. "Sir, we've picked up a distress signal from the surface," reported Lieutenant Jameson, Ethan's second-in-command. His brow furrowed as he handed the communicator to Ethan. Ethan studied the signal's data. "Martorian encryption," he murmured, recognizing the distinctive pattern. "Could be a trap, or someone in real trouble." "Orders, Captain?" Jameson asked, his tone indicating the weight of the decision. Ethan paused, considering their mission of peace and the value he placed on life, regardless of the origin. "Prepare a response team. We're going down there. If someone's alive, it's our duty to help them." As the rescue team prepared for descent, Ethan briefed them on the potential dangers. "Stay sharp and keep communications open. We don't know what we're walking into." The shuttle pierced the planet's atmosphere, flames licking its hull as it descended toward the coordinates of the signal. The landing was rough, stirring clouds of sand as the engines fought against Nintar's harsh winds. Upon disembarking, Ethan led his team across the rugged terrain, their steps muffled by the soft sand. The sun had set now, and the temperature dropped sharply, their breath visible in the light of their torches. Finally, they found her. Adara lay semi-conscious by the rock, her condition severe but stable. Ethan approached cautiously, aware of the potential danger, but driven by his inherent sense of duty. "Can you hear me?" he asked gently, kneeling beside her. Adara's eyes fluttered open, confusion and suspicion crossing her features. "Why would humans help me?" she rasped, her voice weak. "We don't leave anyone behind," Ethan replied firmly, signaling his medic forward. As Dr. Miranda Holt, the team's medic, began to administer first aid, Ethan scanned the horizon. The desert was quiet now, but the peace felt tenuous, like the calm before another storm. With Adara stabilized enough for transport, they moved her into the shuttle. As they ascended back to the Resolute, Ethan looked back at the planet, its serene beauty belying the violence it had just hosted. Back aboard the Resolute, Adara was taken to the medical bay, where she would begin her recovery under the watchful eyes of Dr. Holt. Ethan pondered the implications of their rescue. This act of mercy could be a simple footnote in the ongoing conflict, or a pivotal moment that might lead to something greater. As Adara regained consciousness in the sterile confines of the ship's infirmary, she was met with the curious and cautious gaze of her rescuer. Ethan introduced himself and offered a simple nod of reassurance. "You're safe here," he assured her, hoping that this small act of kindness might bridge the vast gulf between their peoples. In the silence that followed, a new chapter in their intertwined fates began to unfold, filled with the promise of understanding, and perhaps, eventually, peace. The medical bay aboard the Resolute was bathed in a soft glow as Dr. Miranda Holt tended to Adara's wounds. Outside, the darkness of space enveloped the ship, a stark contrast to the life-saving efforts happening within. Captain Ethan Parker stood at the observation window, watching the stars, his thoughts heavy with the implications of rescuing a Martorian warrior. Lieutenant Jameson entered the room, breaking Ethan's contemplation. "Captain, High Command is on the line. They're asking for a full debrief." Ethan nodded, his expression resolute. "Patch them through to my office. I'll handle it." Walking to his office, Ethan prepared his thoughts. He knew this debrief could determine much more than just his career. It could influence the future relations between humanity and the Martorian Empire. As he entered his office, the screen flickered to life, revealing Admiral Hayes, his superior. "Captain Parker, Explain the situation. You've brought a Martorian aboard. This is highly irregular. Ethan stood firm, his voice steady. Sir, we received a distress signal. It was our duty to respond. Leaving her to die would have contradicted everything we stand for. The Admiral paused, assessing Ethan's conviction. And what's the status of the Martorian? Stable, but severely injured. We're keeping her in the medical bay under guard, Ethan replied, ensuring the Admiral understood the precautions taken. Hayes sighed, the weight of command etched on his face. Keep me updated, Parker. This could either be a diplomatic asset or a considerable liability. Handle it carefully. Yes, sir, Ethan responded, as the communication ended. With the debrief over, Ethan returned to the medical bay. Dr. Holt was finishing her examination of Adara. She'll recover, but it's going to take time. She's been through a lot, the doctor reported. Ethan looked over at Adara, who was now conscious and observing quietly. How are you feeling? He asked, his tone more gentle than his usual command voice. Adara's gaze was wary, but there was a hint of curiosity in her eyes. Why save me? Humans and Martorians are enemies. Why bother? Ethan's answer was simple, yet earnest. Because in the vastness of space, life is too precious to waste over differences. We saved you because it was the right thing to do. This response seemed to puzzle Adara, her brow furrowing as she processed his words. It was clear she was reassessing her long-held beliefs about humans. Ethan continued, We have many questions, and I'm sure you do too. But for now, rest and heal. We can address the rest when you're ready. Adara nodded slightly, the first sign of a truce, however temporary, between them. Later, Ethan convened a meeting with his senior officers in the strategy room. The atmosphere was tense. The implications of harboring a Martorian could not be understated. We need to be prepared, Ethan began, addressing his team. Our actions might draw attention, not just from Earth Command, but from the Martorians as well. We need to be vigilant. Lieutenant Jameson chimed in. Should we consider strengthening our defenses or increasing our surveillance? Both, Ethan replied. Increase patrols around the ship and keep a close watch on any incoming signals. We don't know how the Martorians will react when they find out we've taken one of their own. As the meeting continued, strategies were devised and roles assigned. The Resolute would need to be more than just a warship now. It might also become a diplomatic vessel, depending on how events unfolded. In the solitude of the command deck, Ethan looked out into the starry expanse, pondering the delicate balance of power, diplomacy, and morality. Saving Adara was a decision made in the moment, guided by his principles, but its consequences would ripple through the galaxy, potentially altering the course of their interstellar relations. As the ship traveled through the quiet of space, the stars outside seemed to watch and wait, just like the crew of the Resolute for what was to come. In the sterile calm of the medical bay on board the Resolute, Adara, the wounded Martorian warrior, gradually came to terms with her situation. Surrounded by humans, her historical adversaries, she was conflicted, but recognized the irony in her reliance on them for survival. As her physical strength returned, so did her sharp mind begin to churn with questions about the future. Captain Ethan Parker visited her often, ensuring her comfort and trying to bridge the chasm of cultural differences and past hostilities that lay between their species. During one of these visits, Adara spoke up, her voice still weak but insistent. Captain Parker, why am I still alive? My people would have left you for dead. Ethan, who had been expecting the question, nodded thoughtfully. Maybe that's the difference between us, he replied. We believe every life has value. That's why you were saved, and that's why you'll be treated fairly under our care. Adara mulled over his words. The concept was foreign, challenging the doctrines she had been raised on, which dictated that strength and power were the greatest virtues and that the weak were to be discarded. And what now? What happens when I am healed? Ethan considered his words carefully. That's up to you. You could help us understand your people better, work towards peace, or, if you choose, return to your people. The idea of working towards peace intrigued Adara. And if I chose to help, what would be expected of me? Ethan smiled slightly, encouraged by her interest. Information mainly. Help us understand your tactics, your culture. Help us negotiate a truce. The proposition was risky. Adara knew this could be seen as betrayal by her kin. Yet, she also recognized an unprecedented opportunity to perhaps change the perennial fate of her people locked in endless conflict. Give me some time to consider, she said, turning away to gaze out the small porthole at the stars. Of course, Ethan replied, standing to leave. We'll respect your decision, whatever it may be. In the days that followed, the Resolute hummed with tension and activity. News of a Martorian aboard, alive and being treated, spread among the crew, stirring a mix of curiosity and distrust. Ethan and his senior officers, including Lieutenant Jameson, worked to maintain order and focus on their primary mission, while managing the delicate situation with their unexpected guest. Jameson approached Ethan with concerns during one of their strategy meetings. The crew's uneasy, Captain. They're not sure what to make of this alliance, if it can even be called that. Ethan acknowledged the sentiment. I understand their concerns, but this could be a turning point. If Adara can help us forge a path to peace with the Martorians, the benefits could outweigh the risks. Meanwhile, Adara spent her time learning more about humans and their culture through the ship's databases. The more she learned, the more she began to see the humans not as the monsters depicted in Martorian propaganda, but as beings with their own hopes, fears, and desires for peace. Finally, Adara made her decision. She called for Ethan, who arrived at her quarters with a mix of anticipation and wariness. I've made my choice, Adara began, her voice steady. I will help you, not because I betray my people, but because I see a chance for something better. For all of us. Ethan's relief was palpable. Thank you, Adara. Your help could save many lives. What will happen, Adara said, a fatalistic note in her tone. I am ready. With Adara's decision, a new chapter began. She participated in briefings, offering insights into Martorian strategies and political structures that were invaluable to the humans. Slowly, the crew began to view her not just as a former enemy, but as a crucial ally. As the Resolute continued its patrol through the sector, the alliance between Ethan and Adara strengthened. They planned together, strategized, and sometimes shared quiet moments of contemplation about the universe and their small places within it. The journey was fraught with uncertainty, but for the first time, there was a glimmer of hope. A hope that perhaps, through understanding and cooperation, a lasting peace might finally be within reach. On board the Resolute, the newfound alliance between Captain Ethan Parker and Adara, the Martorian warrior, began to show its first fruits. Adara's insights into Martorian strategies and politics proved invaluable, and a tentative peace plan started taking shape. Ethan and his team worked tirelessly, preparing a comprehensive proposal they hoped would be accepted by both human and Martorian leadership. However, the fragile peace was not without its enemies. Within the ranks of both species, there were factions that viewed cooperation with suspicion and disdain. Unbeknownst to Ethan and Adara, a radical faction within the Martorian military had not forgiven Adara's defection and saw it as a profound betrayal. As the Resolute neared a scheduled rendezvous point to discuss the peace proposal with Martorian representatives, tension simmered among the crew. The peace talks were a beacon of hope for many, but a thorn in the side for those who had suffered at the hands of the Martorians. Lieutenant Jameson approached Ethan with concerns about security. Captain, I've beefed up security for the talks, but I'm worried. There are rumors of dissent within the Martorian ranks. Some don't want this peace to succeed, Jameson reported, his brow furrowed in worry. Ethan nodded, his expression serious. Keep your eyes open, Lieutenant. We can't afford any surprises. Meanwhile, Adara spent long hours preparing, reviewing every detail of the peace plan. She knew the stakes were high, not just for her future, but for the possibility of ending centuries of conflict. Her commitment to peace deepened, driven by a growing respect for Ethan and the sacrifices of the human crew. On the day of the rendezvous, the Resolute met with the Martorian ship Herald in neutral space. The atmosphere was tense as delegations from both sides gathered in the conference room aboard the Resolute. Ethan opened the meeting with a speech about cooperation and the benefits of peace, his voice firm yet hopeful. As the talks proceeded, Adara took the floor, explaining the strategic advantages of a ceasefire and the economic benefits of open trade between their peoples. Her words were persuasive, her knowledge of Martorian needs evident. However, not all were swayed. Midway through her presentation, an encrypted signal triggered an alarm on one of the security officers' panels. Before Jameson could react, the doors to the conference room were sealed shut, locking everyone inside. Panic ensued as armed Martorian soldiers, hidden among the delegates, revealed themselves, aiming their weapons at the humans. Ethan reacted swiftly, moving to shield Adara. What is the meaning of this? he demanded, staring down the leader of the Martorian soldiers. "This is no peace summit," the leader snarled. "It's a trial for a traitor." He pointed his weapon at Adara. "You betrayed your people, Adara. You conspired with our enemies. There can be no forgiveness for such treachery." Adara stood, her face a mask of calm defiance. "I seek peace, not betrayal. You dishonor our people by rejecting the chance to end this needless bloodshed." As the standoff intensified, Jameson managed to override the door controls, allowing armed human security forces to storm the room. A brief but intense firefight ensued, with Ethan and his team working to subdue the insurgents without significant casualties. In the chaos, Adara was wounded, a stray shot grazing her shoulder. Ethan quickly moved to her side, applying pressure to the wound. "Hang on, Adara. We'll get you through this." The mutineers were eventually subdued, and order was restored, but the damage to the peace talks was significant. In the aftermath, as Adara was treated for her injuries, Ethan reassured her, "This isn't over. We'll find another way." Adara, despite her pain, managed a weak smile. "As long as we're alive, there's hope." The betrayal cast a long shadow over the Resolute and its crew, but it also reinforced the resolve of those committed to peace. Ethan and Adara, supported by their allies, prepared to continue their work, knowing the path to peace was fraught with obstacles, but believing the potential rewards were worth the risk. As the ship resumed its journey, the stars seemed to watch silently, bearing witness to the delicate dance of diplomacy and the enduring human spirit. The attempted mutiny aboard the Resolute had left its mark on the crew, but it also solidified a grim determination among them. As the ship traveled through the void of space, repairs were made and strategies reassessed. Captain Ethan Parker, ever more vigilant, increased security measures, understanding that the road to peace would be fraught with further challenges. Ethan and Adara, their bond strengthened by the recent crisis, continued to work closely together, developing new approaches to engage both human and Martorian leaders. Despite the setback, their commitment to forging a lasting peace had not waned. If anything, the attack had highlighted the desperate need for resolution. Admiral Hayes, back on Earth, had been following the developments with a keen interest. In a secure transmission to Ethan, he expressed his mixed feelings. "Parker, your efforts are commendable, but be wary. We can't afford another incident like that. The political backlash is immense." Ethan understood the gravity of the Admiral's words. "We'll be more cautious, sir, but I believe we're on the right path. Adara is proving to be a vital ally." In the following weeks, preparations for a second peace summit were underway. This time, security was tighter, and the location was kept secret until the last possible moment. The chosen venue was a neutral space station, renowned for its strict adherence to diplomatic neutrality. Meanwhile, intelligence reports began to filter in through both human and Martorian channels. Rumors of a large-scale mobilization of Martorian forces near key strategic points suggested a potential impending attack, possibly aimed at disrupting the peace process once more. Ethan convened a meeting with his senior staff and Adara to discuss these developments. "We need to be ready for anything," he declared, his expression grim. "Jameson, make sure our tactical teams are on high alert. Dr. Holt, prepare the medical teams. We can't be caught off guard." Adara, her face marked by a resolute seriousness, added, "We must also consider that these movements could be a feint, designed to draw attention away from their true intentions." As the Resolute approached the space station, tension aboard the ship was palpable. The crew was on edge, knowing that the outcome of the upcoming summit could very well dictate the future of interstellar relations between humans and Martorians. On the day of the summit, representatives from both sides gathered at the space station. The atmosphere was charged, a mix of hopeful anticipation and underlying suspicion. Security was omnipresent, with both human and Martorian guards keeping a vigilant watch. The talks began with formalities, each side expressing a cautious optimism. Adara took the lead for the Martorians, her presence a powerful symbol of the potential for change. She spoke eloquently about the need for unity and the benefits of peace, drawing on her own experiences and the shared history of conflict that had brought so much suffering to both peoples. As the discussions delved into more substantive issues, such as territorial disputes and arms reductions, the tone became more contentious. However, the commitment to dialogue remained strong. Breakthroughs were made in several key areas, leading to tentative agreements that would form the basis for a comprehensive peace treaty. Just as the summit was reaching its conclusion, an urgent message arrived for Ethan. He excused himself from the negotiations to receive it, a reconnaissance report indicating that the Martorian military movements had been a diversion. The real threat was an impending attack on a key human outpost near the Martorian border. Ethan's heart sank. The implications were clear. Elements within the Martorian military were still actively seeking to undermine any chance of peace. He returned to the negotiation room, his mind racing with the need to address this new threat without derailing the progress they had made. "Adara, we need to talk," he whispered to her, sharing the news of the impending attack. Her expression darkened with the realization of what was at stake. Together, they decided to bring the information to the summit, to confront the Martorian representatives openly with the evidence of the planned attack. The session resumed with a heavy air of tension. Ethan and Adara presented the reconnaissance data, laying out their concerns transparently. "This is a test of our intentions," Ethan declared to the assembly. "How we respond to this will define the future of our relations." The Martorian delegates, shocked by the revelations, agreed to an immediate recess to consult with their command. The summit was left in a precarious balance, the hope for peace hanging by a thread. As the Resolute orbited the planet Nintar, the air was thick with anticipation and apprehension. The peace talks had shown promise, but intelligence reports hinted at a buildup of Martorian forces preparing for a significant offensive. Captain Ethan Parker and Adara, the former Martorian warrior now turned crucial ally, had spent countless hours in the strategy room, planning their defense. "Adara, do you think they will really attack?" Ethan asked, looking over the battle maps displayed across the screen. Adara nodded gravely. "Yes, they believe that a show of force might tip the scales back in their favor. We must be prepared." Ethan called a meeting with his senior officers and Adara to finalize their plans. "We have a chance here not only to defend this planet, but also to prove that peace is possible," he stated firmly. "Let's make sure we're ready for anything." The Martorian fleet appeared on the horizon like a swarm of dark clouds, their ships cutting a menacing silhouette against the stars. The battle commenced with a volley of blaster fire that lit up the space around Nintar. The Resolute responded in kind, its cannons firing in rhythmic bursts as Ethan directed the ship's maneuvers. Adara, standing beside Ethan, provided real-time tactics and insights into Martorian strategies. "They will try to flank us from the left. It's a common tactic to break the enemy's focus," she explained quickly. Ethan relayed this information to the fleet, adjusting their formation to counter the attack. "All units, shift to defensive pattern Delta. Cover our left flank." The battle was intense, with both sides exchanging heavy fire. Ethan maneuvered the Resolute with precision, using every bit of his combat experience to gain the upper hand. Meanwhile, Adara's presence proved invaluable, her knowledge allowing them to anticipate and counter the Martorian moves effectively. As the conflict reached its zenith, a large Martorian destroyer broke through the line, heading straight for Nintar's atmosphere. "They're trying to land troops!" Adara shouted over the din of battle alarms. Ethan made a split-second decision. "Pursue that ship! We can't let them get boots on the ground!" The Resolute chased the destroyer, engaging it in a fierce dogfight. Ethan's tactical acumen shone through as he outmaneuvered the larger ship, allowing them to land a critical hit that disabled its engines. The destroyer drifted, crippled, as the rest of the human fleet moved in to secure it. With the immediate threat neutralized, Ethan and his crew took a moment to assess the situation. The Martorian forces, seeing their flagship disabled, began to falter. Sensing the shift in momentum, Ethan seized the opportunity. "Press the attack! Let's end this now!" he commanded, his voice resolute. The Resolute and its allies pushed forward, driving the Martorian fleet back. Slowly but steadily, the tide of battle turned in their favor. As the last of the enemy ships retreated, cheers erupted across the Resolute's bridge. Ethan let out a deep breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He turned to Adara, who was looking at the retreating ships with mixed emotions. "We did it," he said softly. "Yes, we did," Adara replied, her voice tinged with a sadness only she could fully understand. But at what cost? As they contemplated the debris field that now surrounded Nintar, the reality of their victory settled in. It was not just a military win, but a hopeful precedent for the possibility of peace. However, the scars of battle would take time to heal. Ethan and Adara returned to the strategy room to plan the next steps in their diplomatic efforts. The battle may have been won, but the war for peace was just beginning. They knew that the coming days would require as much courage and determination as the fight they had just endured. The aftermath of the Battle of Nintar was a somber time aboard the Resolute. Captain Ethan Parker, while victorious, faced the toll that the fierce conflict had taken on his crew and the ship. The corridors were quiet, filled with the low murmur of tired voices and the soft steps of medical personnel attending to the wounded. Ethan and Dr. Miranda Holt surveyed the damage in the infirmary, where rows of injured crew members lay, their faces etched with pain, but also with the relief of survival. The medical team worked tirelessly, their faces a mask of focus and fatigue. "It's been tough, but we'll get through this," Dr. Holt reassured Ethan, her voice a comforting balm in the midst of the stark reality. Ethan nodded, his gaze lingering on a young ensign being tended to. "We owe them more than we can ever repay. Make sure they get everything they need, Miranda." "Always do," she replied with a determined nod. In the mess hall turned crisis center, Ethan met with Lieutenant Jameson and Adara to discuss the fleet's status and next steps. The table was strewn with digital maps and status reports, the light from the screens casting an eerie glow on their faces. "Losses are substantial," Jameson reported, his voice heavy. "But the ship's core systems are stable, and we've pushed the Martorians back, for now." Adara, her face showing the strain of the battle and its personal cost to her, added, "Zephyr's tactics were desperate but predictable. With him gone, the Martorians will struggle to regroup. This gives us a much-needed window to strengthen our defenses and help the civilians on Nintar." Ethan considered this, his mind racing through various scenarios. "We need to take advantage of this time, boost our patrols, repair what we can, and maybe most importantly, reach out to potential allies. We can't stand alone again." The trio set to work, planning the logistics of fortifying their position and reaching out to neighboring systems for support. Despite their exhaustion, the urgency of their situation drove them forward, each task marked with the purpose of ensuring their survival. Meanwhile, as the Resolute orbited the battered planet of Nintar, Ethan took a moment to view the surface from the observation deck. The planet, with its vast deserts and rugged landscapes, had borne the brunt of conflict, but stood resilient under the stars. It reminded him of their own persistence, their refusal to yield under the crushing weight of a superior enemy. Turning from the window, Ethan's next task was a communication call to Earth Command, updating them on the situation and formally requesting additional support. The communication was brief, the responses from Earth terse and measured, but the promise of additional ships and resources was a clear sign that the higher-ups recognized the strategic importance of Nintar. With the ship slowly stabilizing and plans set into motion, Ethan felt a rare moment of peace. Yet, his thoughts drifted to Adara, who had sacrificed so much, her position, her home, potentially her future, to help them. He found her in the quiet of the ship's library, gazing out at the stars. "Adara," Ethan began, his tone soft. "You've done more for us than we could have ever asked. How are you holding up?" She turned, offering a small, tired smile. "I believe in what we're doing, Ethan. It's hard, but it's right. What about you? This has been your battle as much as mine." Ethan sighed, the weight of command always present. "It's our battle now, and I think we're winning it thanks to you." They shared a look, a mutual understanding of the costs and the necessity of their fight. It was a brief respite, a moment to acknowledge their shared burden before returning to the task of rebuilding and preparing for what might come next. As they walked back to the command center, the ship buzzed around them, a hive of activity driven by the need to survive and to protect. Ethan knew the road ahead was fraught with challenges, but with Adara and his crew at his side, he felt ready to face whatever came their way. The chapter ends with Ethan looking out over the ship, his crew busy at their stations, a sense of resolve settling in his heart. They had won a significant battle, but the war was far from over. Yet in this moment, there was hope. A fierce, burning hope that they would see this through together, come what may. The war-torn skies above Nintar began to clear as the remnants of the Martorian fleet retreated into the depths of space, their resolve broken by the fierce human resistance. Captain Ethan Parker stood on the bridge of the Resolute, watching as the dawn broke over the planet, a symbol of the new beginning that lay ahead for both humans and Martorians. Beside him, Adara watched quietly, her thoughts a mixture of relief and apprehension for the future. The battle had been won, but at great cost. Many lives had been lost, and the scars of war were etched deep into the hearts and minds of those who survived. Ethan turned to his crew, his voice resonant and clear. "We've faced incredible odds and emerged victorious. Each one of you has shown courage and determination that goes beyond what I could have ever expected. We owe our success to your bravery and to the sacrifices of those we've lost." The crew nodded, a sense of solemn pride filling the room. Lieutenant Jameson stepped forward, his expression one of resolved confidence. "Sir, Earth Command has confirmed reinforcements are en route. They're also sending aid and supplies for Nintar's reconstruction." Ethan nodded in approval. "Good. Let's make sure we're ready to assist in any way we can. The rebuilding process will be long and arduous, but it's a necessary path to peace." Adara approached, her stance resolute. "Ethan, I want to help bridge the gap between our peoples. What happened here shouldn't set the tone for our future interactions. Perhaps it's time for a new treaty, one that fosters collaboration rather than conflict." Ethan regarded her with a deep respect. "I agree, Adara. Your insight and leadership could be crucial in these talks. I'll ensure Earth Command understands the importance of your role in this." As the preparations for the arrival of reinforcements and aid workers commenced, Ethan and Adara took a moment to view Nintar from the observation deck. The planet, with its diverse landscapes and resilient ecosystems, represented a beacon of hope and a testament to endurance. "We've been given a chance to make things right," Ethan mused aloud, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Not just for us, but for future generations." Adara nodded, her eyes reflecting the starlight. "A chance born from hardship, but filled with potential. Let's not waste it." In the following days, as aid ships arrived and the reconstruction of Nintar began, Ethan and Adara worked tirelessly to promote understanding and cooperation between humans and Martorians. Meetings were held, plans were drawn, and slowly, a framework for a lasting peace was forged. Dr. Holt, overseeing the medical aid efforts, found herself working alongside Martorian healers, sharing knowledge and techniques that benefited all. "It's remarkable," she said one evening as she joined Ethan and Adara for a brief respite. "From such devastation, new bonds are forming. It's a reminder of what we can achieve together." Jameson, now promoted to commander, handled the security arrangements, ensuring that the peace talks progressed without threat or interruption. "It's a new kind of mission," he remarked to Ethan during a strategy session, "one that I'm proud to be part of." As the peace treaty was finalized and signed, a ceremony was held on Nintar, with representatives from both human and Martorian governments present. The event was broadcast across human and Martorian channels, a public declaration of their commitment to peace and mutual prosperity. Ethan stood beside Adara as they addressed the assembly, their words marking the beginning of a new era. "Today we stand together, not as foes, but as allies," Ethan declared, his voice steady and hopeful. "We choose to forge a path of peace, to build rather than destroy, to heal rather than wound." Adara followed, her voice echoing Ethan's sentiments. "In unity, there is strength. Today's treaty is not just a promise to each other, but a commitment to our future, a future we will build together." The ceremony concluded with applause and a sense of triumph, the crowd dispersing under the light of a setting sun that painted the sky with hues of gold and purple. As the chapter, and the war, closed, Ethan and Adara looked out over Nintar, their hearts lighter than they had been in years. They had faced unimaginable challenges, fought desperately against the shadows of annihilation, and now stood at the threshold of a new beginning. For them, for Nintar, and for the countless lives intertwined in their journey, the future was unwritten, filled with promise and hope. Under the fading light, they turned to each other, their partnership sealed not just by battle, but by a shared vision of peace, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead together.